Yikaya yaxsatini tekat yuhan. Jachat ayawi itikak kainach yechat yati. Hechasakun ya ashkulcheta atlin kuu aya ke akwashati. Helfasa o tikoa hosaku atlin kuu ya haani kak hasituaw saku ya ashkulcheta has awaltini. Qayati ya atlin a hasituaw saku ya kayati. We in wad adusa hastu inye jechwanein hasu khan hasakawani kadatawe ashkulcheta dat yachsawe aya hasawaltini dasa hastu tuwagsagu ya chak gold medal you do asago at gun yachyati yawadlaki at yawt like gun yachyati yawdu wadlaki at chak away ya kanach tu kainuch aya hasawaltini which agu kuu ya yidatsu hasu tuasagu kakhatsu atlina achin ayati one qanins ya ashkadushet yeg a itikade ayachwagud ya khat takaude yuk tlekhosagu guksa yek qanug ya gwal jilqat jilqut quan has jilqut quu has jilquk gul jilqat achtla yina nachawe achtla ditla Heidelberg aya ke genki ke uwat hoe kuchzati like hoe kuchzati waterfall Alaska ye awa adatu takhwatankia yaki datati nakhsahayati one qanins qol hashawa hik aya we hayuqatangitin achawe yuqatankach tuasagu ejitkhati gwalli tuasagu itqatishi yeqwati tlech aya yeqwati takat yohan ganilchi shaqaiti sa akhi tak itit qawaha ye awa yeqwaji gant aya akhulqen khas gant akhlqen khasatin ya tlech yeqqushqid ya yidat gwal taika gwal dechga qanaqa yeqwati tlech yinde yanakhiwe we qaqa like Jaanawe khats tutyeti qa ayanach yaqnatain gank ye awa gulchi shaqaiti sa akhi yitogasagu yaqiyatani guk okay let's see. It's good to see everybody. There's a lot of people who are probably watching basketball, which is okay. The elders used to talk to me about how important the gold medal was when they were young too. They used to watch it. It used to be a tournament. You used to well, it is a tournament, but you used to have to play to get into the tournament. That's what I heard. And I like to watch it sometimes. But I'm usually teaching in the evenings. Like spring breaks never line up with the Juneau School District and the university. Like I think they wish to gate though at that. They argue about it maybe. But sometimes when I go into the gym, I get nervous. There's a lot of people. I don't know where to sit. Do I sit with my family from Héen, my family from Klukwan? Do I sit with my family from Heidelberg? So, I'm always nervous. And, I think COVID too got me nervous around crowds sometimes. But it's fun. I think it's fun to see people. I've got a lot of family in town. So if folks are down there, okay. Hope you're having fun. I thought we'd start today. I also said it's getting to be springtime, that's for sure. and I could tell because it's not dark out.
No, I'm inside here.
And it won't be dark for probably an hour or two. The sun isn't even setting, it's still in the sky. And it's getting warmer. So I thought we'd start today with just maybe some helpful learning language. Because sometimes we do get into the thick of things, and I get pretty excited about explaining concepts. And when we start grasping concepts individually or as a group, I'm like, okay, now the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. But I want to give us some cues, because maybe I miss the cues sometimes when people are getting overwhelmed or just full of information and are ready to do something else, especially putting things into practice through looking at stories, translating sentences, trying to develop some verbs on your own. So I thought I'd go over some phrases that I think might be helpful. So you could say this, and what are you saying if you say "chatshawahik"? Anybody know?
I'm full of something.
I'm full, right? And this is of solids or abstract. Okay. So that's I'm full. So chatshawahik, you could say that's something you could say. And if you say chatshawahik and like we're in the context of like learning something, I will certainly take it as a sign that you need a little break. You're starting to get like full of information. It's gonna start. Konei aya wichakut yiktach aya yikat. It's gonna start falling here. Wasa? Okay, and then I thought we'd learn this one. Ach Kayaaní. There we say Ach Kayaaní. Ach Kayaaní. Ach Kayaaní. Any takers on what that could mean? Oh, let me get you.
Hey, I'm locking myself away for class. Bye.
Gold medal.
Yeah, Héen is playing.
Oh, are they? Oh, okay. Okay. Ach Kayaaní. Anybody know what that is? It's overwhelming me, it's overpowering me. And so here's something else like this is like, okay, I'm oversaturating. And this is just something you could say to signal like, let's pause, let's slow things down. And I think it's fine. I think also like trying to think of the collective here. We've got on any given night, we've got somewhere between 13 and 20 people who are here learning, and people are going to absorb things at different levels. So I would say don't feel nervous about trying to slow things down and say, wait, I'm not, this is going, we left this other concept. Because one time someone said, they said to me, I feel like when I'm learning from you, I had this professor who used to write notes with their right hand, walk towards their right, and erase them with their left hand as they went. And she said, that's what I feel like when I'm learning with you. And I said, oh, that's a really cool visual, but I feel like that's maybe not a compliment. And so I'm fine like stopping and talking about stuff. And then we'll also just sort of measure the momentum, right? Because you could also, the other thing that can happen, I thought would maybe use this one. So this is from a Raven story, and I got to give context to it because it's an unusual phrase. We should say it first. Kayaaní. Perhaps it should be, let me. Kayaaní. 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 So this kind of means fly correctly. And the context here is Raven flew out of this whale and he was all covered with blood and melted fat and he couldn't see. So at first the people were saying, Kendeni dakin, Kendeni dakin, fly straight up, fly straight up. And when he went way up, they said, Koyachni dakin, which means fly straight, like fly like you're supposed to. And I thought we'd use this if you, I'll give you a phrase, if you think I'm drifting too far from the path. Because sometimes I get excited about things, one thought leads to another thought, leads to another thought. Or if, here's another one you could say, Deyichyakaku, Deyichyakaku, Deyichyakaku. Walk on the trail. Right, so there's another way you could say it, like get back on the path, right? And so, you know, because it's a journey for all of us, and everybody, well, once you get to this point where you're starting to move into advanced concepts and you're starting to just, you know, try and unlock a lot of things with the language, which means we've got to get to a point where we're using the language a lot. I want to give folks opportunities to chime in and just sort of say, like, hold on, I'm getting lost, hold on, I'm getting tired, hold on, I was just getting this thing, and then you abandon it too quickly. But I just wanted you to have a few things to sort of say to you know, it's like shooting a flare, you know, you shoot up in the night and we'll sort of go from there. And then it gives us a chance to stop and pause and reflect. And we can always reflect because we're going through some really big things where we're trying to unlock the entire language and how it functions, but I know it could be a lot. And so sometimes also we have to balance how much we're looking at the structure of the language and how much we're just listening to it, speaking it, and looking at the language itself and how it functions. Or else, you know, there's always a danger. So the danger, if you don't do enough of the structural stuff, that people will just keep talking, and there's certain concepts I think that will be difficult to grasp. Like you'll always use the verb in the same sort of mode or something. And then if you do too much structure, then people know about the language, but they have a really hard time speaking it. They can understand it, but when you just tell them, okay, tell me a story, tell me a joke, tell me something, and they just really struggle to just talk. So, any thoughts on any of that? You can always speak back to the class.
Kune, in the phrase "Chatshawakuch," meaning I'm thirsty, can you kind of break down each piece of that for me?
Yeah. So let's go take a look at kuch. So when we want to understand a verb, my suggestion is go to the verb dictionary. And so in the verb dictionary, we're going to scroll down to kuch, K-U, X. Well, K-O-O-X is what we're going to be looking for. So here's the K's, and we go down, and we get to kuch. So we see that you have kasakuch, which is to bail water out, kashakuch, which is to drain, for water to drain out, like a kettle runs dry or something, and then shawakuch. So shawakuch, like the literal thing is like the water has been emptied from my head, right? Like there's no water left in my head. And there's something really interesting in Tlingit about these phrases. So like so here's thirsty, drain, like to bail something out is, you know, kuch. So let's go look up bail, drain, thirsty, then we'll come back to this kuch. So if we go bail, we say ke kautusa kuch we yak. We bailed all the water out of the boat. Then you see yak, sheen, teen, kasakuch, which is a command form, bail it out with the bailer. If we look at both of these, there's a couple things that we can see is that this is a zero conjugation verb because it's closed, and in the perfective, it's short and high, right? So then you could say kasakuch, and that's bail it out, ya kasakuch, bail out the boat, right? The next one was drain. So we go down to drain. And so we see ich kauchakuch, the oil drained out. Another perfective, also short and high, that means it's zero conjugation. You qut, should be underlined on it. You qut a cut kauchakuch. The pot has gone dry.
Why is the accent backwards? Is it a different pronunciation or?
At this point, that like right here,
Mhm.
they used to write a long low with a downward, and so at some point that transition say just write two vowels. Like you don't have to mark. So they marked long and low, and you don't have to now. Good question. And then we'll go check out thirsty. So we go to thirsty. And this is where, like, I know that thirsty is also like a metaphor in English, like thirsty AF or something, right? But that doesn't work in Tlingit because, like, shawakuk just means there's no water in your head, and which means you got to get water in your head. And we'll look at one more phrase after this. So, whoops, talking and scrolling at the same time, I went right by. So if we get to thirsty, we get right here. So we see chat shawakuk. Also short and high, so also a zero. They'll never be thirsty again. Well, must have an endless supply of water. So coming back to our notes here. So the kuch part means to be empty of water. That's really what it means. And so on its own, it means like the water has run out, evaporated, boiled out. And so we see like shawlakuch, and then the S classifiers for someone to do it, right? So when you say chat shawakuch, you're literally saying my head has run dry of water, which is interesting because there's this other phrase which goes like this, Héen. Has anybody ever heard that? And you could say Tlesh Isha to Dehin. And you could say Tlesh Ach Shatudihin. So as far as how to use this phrase, you would be changing a possessive suffix on here. Oh, so you'd say du, Tlesh du Shatudihin. So this phrase is not a nice thing to say. Like it literally means they have no water in their head. And that means they are stupid. And that's how you say that in Tlingit. So that means if you're thirsty, you better go get some water or else you're going to end up with no water in your head. And that's a bad thing. Like water in your head in Tlingit is like a good thing. Like that means you're ready to think. And so, yeah, those are probably fairly related concepts, but I'm not sure why they say Teshatudihin. It might be Shantudihin. Let me go see if I can find it. Good question. Any other thoughts or questions?
How would you say the land is dry? Like if it hasn't rained for a long time, there's a drought. But is that a similar
Oh, yeah.
thirsty or dry?
I think you could say we ended up with Kaushakuhu Heen. I think that's what I'll have to look. Because we ended up with Kaushakuhu Heen when we had we asked the speaker how to say like a dried up riverbed. Because especially we were in Hawaii, and in Hawaii there's really wild, like there's this big thing like it looks like that used to be a river, and then it'll rain a whole bunch, and then there's like a giant river there. And like, oh, there is a river, and then the next day it's just gone, right? But we'll go look up dry because that's a good question. So here's dry, and we see Yahuk. So now we've got huk instead of kuh. So we'd say huk. Your laundry has already dried. My throat is dry, right? Different than I'm thirsty. We could see you could switch that to an S classifier to talk about drying something, right? So we see this common thing, switching to S or L to say somebody's doing that thing. We're going to dry some deer meat. My clothes have already been dried by the machine. Both of these are also, again, zero conjugation because they're short in the perfective. To be dry inside of a container, tesh kuwuhuk. This isn't dry. Saknin kawahuk. The flour is dry. Also, saknin, these days we're saying saknin for bread and saknin kahuk, which is related to this. Saknin kahuk is the word we're using for flour now, like bread flour. They dried the pot out. And then we see, here's the dry weather. So you say, hun ayaudati idach kukahukch. After the north wind has been blowing, everything seems to be dry. Kukahukch. So here you'd say kuwahuk if it's dry right now. And then you have crisp weather, like when it's dry and crisp, especially when it's super cold. Kukawahak. And then we get into khan for smoking fish specifically. So this is the fish smoking, and this is where atkan hitti comes from, which is, this is something I want to, okay. I actually think that this is khan without the underline on it. Gat khan. Atkan hitti. Okay, hold on. Now we gotta check this verb. So there is a spot where we can check these verbs. So this is Jeff Lear's notes. I do think we have looked at this before. It's a very large document. If you have some document that's going to crash your things, like this is one of them. So I always use the Adobe Acrobat to look at this one. And we're going to go look for on with no underline on the X to see if that is smoking. And we can also look at kuh on here as well. So like we'll start with kuh, go back to this first verb we were looking at. And we see it here. And let me zoom in. So we have kakucha, baler, kawakuch. So what you see like on the left-hand side is alphabetical, and then it shows you like basically what that verb root means. Right above it is a kuch, which is I think a silent fart. But this here is thirst, dry, bail out. Kaushakuch became dry. Adat kaushakuch. The tide went out, leaving it dry, like a boat. Especially like if the tide goes out and can't get your boat in the water. Yen kaushakuch and shawakuch, thirsty, and shaushakuch. So you could say ashkuch cheta ajawe chat shaushak or chat shaushakuch. So ashkush chetach chat shaushakuch. Basketball made me thirsty, right? So then we go to, okay, what were we at? Oh, on. Is it on? Yes, okay, I was right. So every resource we have, so there might be some errors in it, it's not a big deal, but these are things that we should note, is that in the Naish story dictionary, they have khan as smoking fish, but that root is khan, which is why you have on hiti for a smokehouse and on ani for fish camp. But not everybody uses that. If you go to Teslin, I think they say it's a hiti for smokehouse. So I can't remember what got me there. Oh, dry weather is that what got us there. Okay. Other questions? Anything else? Okay.
Hune.
Ah,
Not a question, but just a comment. Ach tu sigu kanashjish. I appreciate what you were sharing, the sentences about just, saying when you're full and that sort of thing. And I know for me, I'm trying to figure out various strategies to internalize the grammar knowledge because I'm pretty sure that's what I need to do in order to speak. And what I'm trying to do right now, if anyone's interested, what I'm doing to help myself, if anyone's interested, if this would help other people as well, I'm going through your verb slideshow and trying to type up notes. And if anyone would like a copy of that, if you find that helpful, I'm happy to share. So if you want to send me your email or something of that nature, I can put you on that.
well, yeah.
Yeah,
Why don't
lots
you
of processing time is what I need to go over things again and again until they sink in.
Okay. Just in terms of distributing it, if you send it to me, I'll just put it on our class webpage.
Okay.
The easiest way.
Okay.
But yeah, those are great points because, like, you also have to find time to engage with each other about this stuff because on a day-to-day basis, there's not very many people who are talking about this, right? And so, but you need to talk to people about it because I think that's how I learned because there was a group of us that we would just nerd out on all of this stuff, be like, oh wait, what's a classifier? Okay, now I know how to use it. Wait, what's the conjugation type? Okay, I can use it. And once we realized we were sort of unlocking this formula, it got very exciting. But then we also realized, and at that time we had just a lot more speakers. And so we could also spend a lot of time talking with speakers, which was really helpful because then we would just be hearing things that we were learning and we're like, wow, they just know that. They just know how to do that thing. And they don't have to think about it because they just do those things. So that's a really good point is that there has to be groups and times to do that. So I'll also reach out. I know we've got about 7 weeks left, maybe 8. And so we're past the halfway point now of the semester, and then we start getting into summer. And so we'll start exploring some things to do now in terms of getting together and studying, and some things to do later in terms of getting together, studying, and talking.
Okay.
Anyone else? Thoughts, questions? Okay. Okay. So I thought we did a whole bunch of grammar stuff, which I think was really good. So I think we'll look at the Táax'aa story for a bit, maybe return to some of our translation exercises, and then where'd it go? Gugsa. Here it is. Okay. Oh, I gotta share sound. Okay. So we had kind of gone through this. We went through this a long time ago. And so I'll kind of get us up to where we're at. And so a storyteller has what Dick Dowenhauer used to call a narrative frame. And that means usually there's something they talk about before they start the story. Then they get into the story. And then sometimes there's something they talk about after the story. And so this is Shah Dog, Robert Zuboff. So we're on slide 70. So we're gonna skip through. We're gonna go through these kind of fast. He was Kayaaní, Yadi. He was born in 1893. So he was born when they lived in Qaq. So people still lived there at this place called Qaq, which is called Basket Bay. And so he was alive when they migrated from there to Angoon, Angoon. The Qaqwaiti have largely been absorbed into the Daeshitan, so they usually stand with the Daeshitan. But my understanding is they are different as far as their origins. When we go through this story, we are using this color-coded system. Oops, this needs to be red. I gotta change that. It was orange at one point. And so, but it's reflected that the colors are right throughout the rest of the slideshow. And so it kind of shows you, basically what you'll do is we would listen to the phrase, and then it says it twice, and then we get to the phrase, and then we can read it. And when we get cut up, we'll go back into the pattern. And the pattern is we listen to Táanáx say it, and then one of you says it. And I'm going to encourage you to try and imitate the way that he talks. Because really, like, listen to the tone and listen to the rhythm of the language. And then we sort of like pull it apart. So green is any of these direction locational things. Gold is a possessive pronoun. Red, and then the verb gets pulled apart into blue, red, purple, brown, gray, you know, in terms of what these things are doing. And so here he says, "Oe achyagu to guide you to Sagan." Yes, in this canoe of mine, in this boat of mine, it was called guide. I used to always just boat around in it, seining. This atnachakuch is really interesting. It's what we call a habitual mode, means always does it. But it can also mean used to always. Like, which is interesting because if you look at the stories, you see it used that way. You can certainly say atnachakuchen. I used to, but I don't anymore. I used to always, but I don't anymore. But you see it used a lot to talk about something that used to happen. Okay, next phrase. So he says, introduces himself. He says, "This is my name. My name is Táanáx." Refers to a village that was around a mountain where people lived at a long time ago. Here's all the parts. I'll put these slides up so you folks can see them. We did these. It was a while ago. Through my name I was summoned by Geet Wayne, a person of long ago who died long time ago. And then, here's lots of greens. And so you see, like, also like through here, where's the verb? Like there's one verb in this sentence. It's located kind of towards the end. How is the verb like generally working? You can look at those types of things. And then here's another sentence with one verb in it, which is to die. I'm a young man, and I would say who's just come into puberty is how I would interpret that sentence, because yidak has to do with phase of life where you have gone through puberty, then you become either yidak or shatk. And if you put yis in front of it, then that tells me like you have just become that recently. So he's probably 12 or 13 years old, maybe younger. From the time I just became a young man, I've had a boat, a motorboat. So you see all the parts. Oops, I don't know why that's up there. All those parts are there. And he says, I had the 1906 model. Come out Yanastini, at the time when it's just coming out. And Yanastini, we usually hear the imperfecto of that verb, which is siti. I have these two big boats, is what he's saying. Yahuchi ay o achjit. Achjit jit chwasati. I gave the last one to my son. And what's interesting, like this is the mosquito story, right? So he does all of this stuff before he even tells the story, right? Which is interesting. He wrecked the boat. It's a boat I used to go around in all the time. Got a bunch of notes on here. He knows what my name is, and he says this to me. Away ya akhsai asku away yachat yosaka. Achtuach ayasagu in kunachdak kachonigi ya esai. I want to explain to you your name.
A couple slides back, it said it brought up what's it called, Guintin again. Was that gathered from context, or did I?
Oh yeah.
I was trying to figure out like where the what do you call it, the pronoun was, because I
Right.
didn't know if it was his son or
To get back to Gitwain.
yeah.
Yeah, so this, I take a lot of the translations from the Downhowers, and when the Downhowers would translate, they would usually translate for, one of their goals was to elevate Tlingit literature, and so they sometimes would take some extra steps to make it really relatable to an English speaker. But if you really look at the Tlingit, once you mention someone's name, like it rarely mentions them again. Right, then it just switches all the third person pronouns. And so this, the literal interpretation here, as we see, that is this, my name, they know it, that is thus, they said to me, right? And so it's all third person pronouns right there. Yeah, good catch. And then now, the story. Now this is where the story begins, right? All this stuff was leading up, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that's in the cultural context. His name is Shah Dag. That name comes from the interior. That's where people lived when the Tlingit people all lived in the interior. But he doesn't say that. But yeah, and so that's why he's talking about his name, and his name is related to this story. That's the parts that, you know, when you know a whole bunch about like Tlingit culture and you're telling somebody stuff, you sometimes end up just leaving stuff out because you assume that they know that. Maybe. So now here's where the story begins. We were repeatedly in the interior. Our life was very difficult there. Yachat. The salmon, you can interpret that as this salmon or these salmon. Tlingit does not use the word the or a or n. Does not have any articles. If you learn Hawaiian, they have articles, and you have to have articles before a noun, or else it becomes a name. You have to say kapua, or else if you just say pua, then everyone will think, oh yeah, I know Pua. She lives right down the street. From the ocean, they swim up for us to eat. And literally, this is like they swim up to our mouths. So it's very fun how this stuff works. Master storyteller, amazing storyteller. His language is very complex, but his pacing is really good. When we get back to slide 70, we'll start listening to him again. A'aya is sort of like, this is how it is, I guess. I don't know, it's a narrative device, you'll see it pop up. Kachdat yachsaya It is so very delicious to us, the salmon. Life was really difficult. Life is really difficult in the interior. So, it was so, how difficult it was. People are eating each other. This is an instance, I think I did mention this before. This vowel right here doesn't mean anything. You could say, but if you say those people are eating each other, which is an interesting thing to say, you have to have a vowel there because technically you're just going to have 0 and this the letter S, because the letter S is just going to be, that's the whole classifier. But you cannot have only a consonant in the prefix. If there's a consonant, there has to be a vowel. And so that's why we call it a peg vowel. It pops up just so that you can say that prefix. Because you can't really say wuch-scha. It's too weird. It's like, no, you got to put a vowel in there. And this does happen sometimes, right? It's a vowel that doesn't mean anything. It's pretty rare, but it will pop up sometimes. And Antqini is the villagers. So this is saying they were eating each other. The villagers were eating each other.
Une, is that a vowel, that I vowel, is it always an I vowel that pops up, or do other vowels, could it be other vowels that pop up in that place instead of an I?
It will be an I, which is interesting. I don't know, so I could show you, there's another example I know of. So if we go to color in the verb dictionary and we look up, it's going to give us an example of how a salmon changes its color, which is wudzakak. So wudzakak would be the verb. It's like the sockeye has turned red, or the coho has turned red, or the dog salmon has turned kind of a greenish red. It refers to when a salmon changes its color in the fresh water. But then here, so that letter I, it doesn't mean anything. It's a third person verb. It's just saying it changes color, but you can't have it, so it's got to have that letter I in there. But it doesn't mean anything. It just helps you with the prefix. Which is interesting because there's another place, I guess, where there's kind of a similar thing that does happen with an I vowel. So when you say ach, eat, ideshe, which is help me, and you'd say ach in kananik, which is tell me, and ach, well, where you can say ach ide, ach ide, okay, well, ach ide. But this E sound right here is doing the same thing. It doesn't mean anything. It's just there so that you can, because you can't put a suffix on. You can't say ach de, right? And you can't say do de. You have to say do I de, do chande, do in. So whenever you have this in or eat, you have this empty thing right there that only exists so you can put a suffix on there. And it's also an I vowel. It's just long. Where does the story go? Okay. So the cannibal exists at that time. It has its own name. It has another name, which is qatil, which is, I think, means a scar on its rump. A'awe adayuch atil atkinuch. Oh, a'awe adayuch atil atkinuch. Ya el kade hawulgazi. We're almost caught up. That was what we would always talk about when we migrated to the coast. Adayuch atil atkinuch. So this nuch can pop up after a verb, and it means the verb always happens. The verb kind of takes a little bit of a different shape, but that's just, if you see nuch at the end, it's usually saying like it always happens. Ya el kade hawulgazi. This is the verb for migrating, especially if you're going to live somewhere new and you're not really sure where it's going to be. That's kind of what that verb means. Okay, now we're all caught up, so now we're going to take a little different approach. We're going to go to the next slide. I'm going to play the audio. You hear him say it twice. Then we'll go to the text, and then I'll ask someone to read it and try to sound as much like him as you can. Okay. We're just imitating a master storyteller. We're not trying to make fun of the way the person talks or anything like that. It's just like we're being coached by someone who was born in the late 1800s on how to speak Tlingit. He does have a false start there, so you don't have to say ada twice.
Adayuch adutla atkinuch.
Okay? Adayuch atilla atkinuch. Sheesh. So then you see adayuch atilla atkinuch. So this is a possessive pronoun, which means it's, right? So you could say ida yuch atilla atkinuch. We always talk about you. I could say hasduda yuch atilla atkinuch. We always talk about them. Right, so that can change, that da right before the da part. Ach, I, du, ha, yi, hastu. Ask questions if you got them, or else we'll just keep going. What's that?
Renee, I was wondering, what would be the difference in saying nooch and ending with the ch for like always or repeatedly, I guess?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. So what has to happen, so with the nooch, well, let's just we'll go look up this verb, because there's probably that ch version in here. So we're going to scroll up to the ot, and it's this last one, which is communicating. And then we see thinking, changing mind, and it's this one. Right, so here we have yuch atutla atk, we are conversing, and we can go down and we see yuch aututla at, we conversed, yuch agachtutla at, we're going to converse, yuch achtutla at. And so this says like it doesn't exist. And so that's probably why it's saying, it's going with yuch atutla atk nuch. Yuhas atk. Well, there is a negative version, so but this is what it would look like, because it would look like yuch atutla atch. So one of the big differences, like for nooch, you could put it on there and the verb itself goes through a little bit of changes. The biggest one is it should be a -I classifier. But if we go look at a different, a similar verb, so this is a 0 conjugation. If we just find one that's na, like here's one that's na, and let's go see if there's a habitual form of that one. So if we find the habitual form of this one, we see an tutla atch. So the big difference is that the conjugation prefix has to be in there. You can't just put a ch on the end. It has to have that on there. So like if we go look up a couple other verbs, like some that we might know, like yati, to be, and qudzati, to exist. So we'll drift down to the T verbs, and there's a million of them. There's a whole bunch of these. If we go down, we get T, and we can see, we'll just find, well, here's qudzati. We'll come back to that. And here's yayati. It probably should be the first one. It should be rearranged to be the first. That should be number one. But this is na. So I would expect it to be ye na teach, right? And I've heard that before, right? But if we learn how a habitual works, we'll also be able to predict it by knowing what that form should be. So if we go down, we find it. And so here's one that has two examples, right? So here's ye na teach, it's always that way. Ye ti nuch, it's always that way. So as far as meaning goes, I don't think there's any difference between those two. It's not like you should say it this way or that way. They both mean the same thing. I certainly would say ye na teach is much more common with this verb. I prefer to use habituals over this form, but this one, it goes from yati to ti, and it goes high toned, right? So that's a 0, the classifier goes to 0, and then you have ti nuch. So ye na teach, but if we go look at qudzati, to be, then we go down and we'll go look at the habitual for this one, and we see it's teach. So that changes quite a bit from qudzati, teach, right? But what happens is that classifier goes to its minus I form, and then you get it. So I don't know if you could say nuch. You probably could. You could. I would expect it to be nuch, for like it's always that way. But I've heard teach. And what's interesting is once you learn how to do the habitual, if you put klesh in front of it, it does not change. Teach, klesh teach. Yena teach, klesh yena teach. But like logically, your English brain might think, well, if it's always that way, if I say the negative version, then it should be never that way, right? But it hasn't become that way yet. So this would be klesh teach, hasn't been born yet. Klesh yena teach, it hasn't become that way yet. There's the saturation point, maybe. That's a good question, though. Really good question. Don't be afraid of asking questions, right? Because like all these things, like all these moving parts, they do all come together. I don't think I have the audio for this one for some reason. I guess I'll say it, and then someone else can repeat it, and we'll take our break. And just the thing we talk about, right? Okay. Okay, come back in 8 minutes. It'll be 6:40 Alaska time. Okay, we talked a little bit on the break about working with recordings and transferring them to digital, and then also what to do with noise. And so I guess I do want to show this before we get back to the story. So here's another recording of Robert Zuboff. Here is a piece of software called Isotope RX10. Maybe this is 9. Okay, this is 9. 10 is out. It's a very useful software. If you're working in Tlingit audio, I recommend finding someone who will buy it for you if you can, because it's $1,000. And then it's a type of software, of course, where every year they'll be like, we got a new version. I don't know if it gets significantly better. But the biggest thing that this thing can do is get noise out of audio. So if you got wind on a microphone, it can help. For this particular recording, we were looking at this thing called spectral denoise. And if we just preview it, it'll show us how much noise it can remove. And we could test it by pushing this bypass button.
Time we was in Tuslan. That's where we created up at interior.
So if you're working in audio, one, get this thing if you can. Two, send me the audio and I can help you with it. The other thing you can do, I guess, well, let's go back to this for a second, is if you go through and you look, the orange shows you how much noise there is in this program. But also if you look at the blue, you really want all of these blue peaks to be up here. Like you want this thing to be as loud as it can without getting distorted. So that also tells you when you get to this point, it gets a lot quieter. So there are other programs you could use, you can get into hardware and stuff where you could level this whole thing out and raise the levels of everything, which I think is helpful because if it's hard to hear, it's already hard it's hard to write down what you're hearing and it's hard to translate. So don't make it harder by having audio that's tough to work with. So, I mean, some stuff, there's not a lot you can do. If there's a whole bunch of, like we were listening to a recording on the break of someone pulling stuff out of a plastic bag, which must have been right near the microphone because it's unbearably loud. And there's not a lot you could do with stuff like that. But with background noise, especially like the hum of something, you can get some of that out. And so I think in the fall, I'll probably run a class on transcription and translation. I just got to figure out the scheduling. It'll probably have to be a daytime class. I don't know if that works for everybody, but we'll see. But you'll listen to audio and it might be something, I might structure it where we do a lot of time outside of class and a little bit of time in class going over stuff. So we'll see. Stay tuned. Okay. Back to Táax'aa. We haven't gotten to like anybody getting clubbed on the head or anything yet. Okay, here we go. So listen to it and somebody will say the lines.
Ya take a tea, ya family, has to ati, ya konakin. Ya take a tea, ya family, has to ati, ya konakin.
I get a reader.
Ya check ya tea ya family has to hak achanadia yak kunakin.
Sheesh. So a couple of things with this, like you could say yati, and that's how you could talk about how many of something there is. For example, I was in Teslin and we are doing a language workshop and a dog walked by that had 3 legs. And I was like, how do you say that? It will be nusk yati chus with Kate. That dog has 3 legs. So that yati is what you'd be using for that. You could say Kayaaní. That would be another way to say family. This is one where I couldn't, when I sort of analyzed this sentence, I couldn't figure out how it works. Is something I haven't heard very much. And this is translated as it's getting scarce. But this is one I'd like to talk to some folks about to see how is that working, right? And so I'm not exactly sure, but maybe I'm not hearing it as well too. Two.
Aya klein nach yatia aya clew out.
Cheesh. Aya kleinach yeti aya kle awatun. So we had kleik yeti or we had back here we have kleik yeti aya, but here we have kleinach yeti. Why does it change?
Living and non-living.
Yeah. So kleinach is people especially. So that's how you count peoples. Kleinach, dachnach, naskinach, dauchuninach, kejininach, teidushunach. Here's like a tip for just helping you think in the language. If you ever have to count anything, count it in Tlingit. And especially play cards where you've got to count by two, like play cribbage in Tlingit, because you'd be like deich, dachun. Because what we found is we could count really fast, but when we started having to add things, we realized all we had done is memorize this. As we tried to count as fast as we could, but then we were like, okay, count by threes. Nask, dog, Klaydushu, right? And so like we would realize like we had just memorized a string of things. And so if you ever have to, and another suggestion was to like read license plates and stuff, although the letters, right? But just the numbers, anywhere there's numbers, try to say those. Or if you gotta like figure out like, oh, how many people do we got here? Because we gotta divide this pizza up, count them by kainach, dachnach, naskinach. Because a linguist once told me that even people who learn multiple languages, whatever language they count in is the one they're most comfortable with. Okay. And then the tle, just keep an eye on this. It means then, at that time, kind of, and just keep an eye on how it works, right? There was this one person who then went hunting.
يقاجاقي أتقى يقاجاقي أتقى
Uqaajaqe atqa.
Yeah, dachnach, that was great. It came through in stereo. So uqajaqi atqa. So this is a really interesting way to say things. What you have here is a potential, right? So you could say "Qush uqajaq." They might kill it, or you could say "Kheshate uqajaqiyeh." They cannot kill it. There's no way they could kill it. So this is, and this should be like this, sorry. So this means I'm going to look for something that I might kill, right? And so if this was you, you could say, "Uqad, uqajaqi atqa qaqwashi." I'm going to go look for something that I can kill. And this is something that is used sometimes in Tlingit. When you learn how to do potentials, those are probably the longest verb modes. But from that you get might not, would have, and cannot. That's how you do all of them, is through this one sort of verb mode. It changes a little bit, but once you sort of get it, and it is kind of long, right? And so a lot of people, when they want to start using them, they'll say klesh Aadé, and you'll say klesh Aadé chwata, yeah. And it's like, no, that's not quite right, because chwata is like slept, chata is I'm sleeping, klesh Aadé un chatayi, yeah. I can't sleep. So it becomes unqatayi. Yaudane wasa.
Qune, when it comes to the phrase for a killer, which I believe is kuajagi would that mean someone who has killed or someone who does kill?
Yeah, that means well, yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. So for that one, we'll go find it. So let me see if the Zoom thing's in my way. What is that under? Murderer? I have it as Kayaaní. But you could say Kuwajak. Well, if we went with that one, let's go with that one. So here you'd have Kuwajak. Well, you actually get like this, Kuwajak. And so in this case, you have K, and then I think it would be that. Okay. Y, 0, yeah, jak. And so what you get here is people, perfective, they as a third person subject, and then you get the classifier, 0 plus I, and then you get kill. So this would mean Kuwajak would mean a single person has killed people, right? So they killed people. And so sometimes this switches to Kayaaní because een is the plural, like this is to kill one thing. But if you're going to kill multiple things, then it's going to switch to een. And so one thing that does happen, so we have Kuwajak, is you could put the letter I at the end of here, which is going to change this to go to a G. And then now you can say Kuwajakiqa. And so what this means, this turns the verb into an adjective, right? So other places where we might see this is tlitseen is strong. So tlitsini, show what? A strong woman, right? And you might have tlchan for stinky. So you might have tlchani at, it's a stinky thing. Whoops, that's got to stay low. So it's called an attributive suffix, and what it does is it turns a verb into an adjective. And so that's what you would get with Kuwajaki, is a killer of people. And then you could have, that could change. It could be Kuwajaki Kate, as a dog that kills people, right? And so it could also be a Kayaaní Kate, and that's a dog that kills people by the masses, right? So then it's really getting into Cujo territory there. Okay, good question.
Tessie kukute aya ya tu ye na te a tu kik i kaku washe. Tessie kukute aya ya tu ye na te a tu kik i kaku washe.
Who's going to read it?
Kukudi ayah yadu yinade adukik du aga kuwashi.
Sheesh. So we have kesh yek ukudi. And what this kind of does, so it gets a different kind of suffix on here. And this is, and what this one does is like says, when he didn't come, and the yek would be like come down towards the beach. And so there's a whole bunch that's built into this particular phrase because he went up into a mountain to go hunting. And so he didn't come back down from the mountain, is what it's saying. So when he didn't come back down, Getu Yunadea, the one who's near him, to keek. So this is saying, this is building in a couple different things. If you ask me, I would say there's 3 brothers, and this is saying the next oldest one. So it is his younger brother, but it's the one close to him. So that's how you would say the next oldest one. Do yinade atu kik. Because that's the youngest one that goes. The youngest one is the one who defeats the cannibal. That's going to happen. Do iqaquwashi. And so here's that E that we had talked about a little while ago. It doesn't mean anything. It's just there so we can put a suffix onto a pronoun. Do iqaquwashi. So when he didn't come back, his younger brother, the next oldest one, looked for him.
Teho aya so tesi ukut. Teho aya so tesi ukut.
Ehu aya su kesi kukut.
Sheesh. So here's all the parts. So huh, that is an independent pronoun. Then him or them, there's no gender in it. Also, not, and here you get the speaker like repeating themselves a bit. Like if you could say this with just one, you could say, Klehu ayatu keshyekhugud. And in him also, they did not come back, right?
Kikukut aya ya kikea. Kikukut aya ya kikea.
Who's gonna? I gotta build lists. Someday I'll build lists and say like, let's just read it in this order. Good.
Yet.
So this one, so we had Kesh Yek Wugudi, and now we switch to Shek Ugud. And we do actually have, this one should have, let's see, where is it? I think it's on this side. So this is a bit of a rare verb mode, and it's saying like after this thing. So you could actually say after he didn't come back down, right? And so you'd hear this one like Gen kuch owe hastu yaku yikdache has ausane hastu ai. When they got there, they took the stuff out of their boat. And so there are some things that Tlingit does when it comes to like putting things into a sequence, and this is one of the ways that it does that. And what you find is when you have master storytellers is they start varying things like this. Like they won't say it the same way twice. They'll say kind of the same thing, which is like he didn't come back. But now the second one, when he didn't come back, now you get to the youngest brother, Yakiki'a. That's how you say the youngest one.
Waschinkata patahatusho. Waschinkata patahatusho.
Question ka tak kadachadusha.
Sheesh. So maybe he was 17. Question katak katachadushu. You could also say question kat katachadushu awedu katagu. So, but it's interesting. Maybe 10 years and 7.
Waschinkata kan katusho ke uste. Waschinkata kan katusho ke uste.
question hat tak ka naska dushuk gi uste.
El Chish. We used to do this thing in like this one class that I was co-teaching. I think they did this activity where they would all, what they tried to do is they would all count to 10. But the rule was nobody could signal who was going to go first. And if anybody went at the same time, you had to start over. And everyone got so excited when they counted to 10. Because like, I don't know, it was some kind of team building thing. Anyways, I'm not exactly sure why the verb is negative here, but like this is the negative form. So like for example, if you wanted to say it's a cat, you'd say douche sati. But you could also say tlech douche uste. And that's the negative form of this verb, right? And so if you go back, he says, Gwalchin katak kadachadushu, maybe 17. Gwalchin katak kanaskadushu get uste. Which is, there's no negative that I can see in here, which is interesting, right? Because it's a master speaker, so there could be things going on that we don't know. And so you could translate that if you wanted to as maybe not quite 18. I don't know.
Yakikea. Yakikea.
Oh, it's a short one. Who wants it?
Yak.
Sheesh. Yakikea, the youngest one.
Chayanas kakaya to hun kohas kaya kunashin. Chayanas kakaya to hun kohas kaya kunashin.
Oh, we got two verbs.
Shayan naskakaya tuhunku haskaya konashin.
Sheesh. So I said you can't put a suffix onto a pronoun. But when you say du hunchu haska, how come you can put it on that hus? Anybody, what do you think?
Not a pronoun here.
Yeah, it's pluralizing that it's pluralizing the kinship term, which is interesting because I think you can say dultóow, they're looking for their mother. And I think you can put a suffix onto a kinship term. Duyadiqaqawishi. I think you can. You can certainly put it on hus, which is happening right here. Okay. Cha ya nasqach. There are some, like, so this, you'd say, to get to the crying verb. Like, let's look at the database here. We'll jump to the database for this one. So if we go in here and we're going to look up crying. Qach. There's a couple things with this verb that I think are worth pointing out, and then coming back to here. So one, you have a g conjugation. So we'd see gaqach. I don't know why you would command someone to cry, but maybe you're a director in a Tlingit play, and someone's supposed to, like, what's your emotion? You're supposed to be crying. The dog just would kick chapuna. I do say this to my kid, he gets very mad at me. So, like that is the third person. A lot of people want to put something on the front of there, but it's just they are crying. And then beginning to cry, we could see that one. But this is a different one, right? So, yan nasqach. So then we go down to here and we get, we don't see this form in here, chasqach. but it is this version, to cry for, to ask for something, which is really interesting because if we come back to here, there are some verbs when you put them into this progressive form. Progressive means there's ya and na, and then it's usually a short high, ya nasqach, ya nagut, ya nasquain, right? And so, or ya anasquain. So this ya na, it means it's in this process of happening. And so this ya nasqach is like they're going along crying as they're going. Duhunchu hasqa yaqun nashin. So one of the things, here's the ya and the na again. These are gray, so probably not sure. My color scheme, but you got ya and na. But the other thing with this ya na is if it's an open verb root, it must close with the n. Okay, so we'll go over some examples, right? So for example, let me check the chat. Okay, chish. So for example, here's a verb, ausaku. Anybody know what that translates to?
They know?
They know it, right? So there is an it on there. So then you could say ya anas queen. They are beginning to know it. So this one's interesting because when a u closes, it goes to W-E-I. It does change. That's just something that happens, right? Here's another one. You could say yaoza'a. So yaoza'a has a couple of different meanings. It really means to poke your face towards something. So this is the verb you'd use for kissing, for inspecting something, for especially like a seal or a sea lion to swim and poke their head up through the surface. And so then you'd have yanas, ain. So when you close the ah, so here's a couple of rules, right? If you have a verb root, and there could be a consonant on there, but we're just talking about the ending. If it ends with a double A and you close it, you're going to go to, it's usually going to go high to ain. And when you close oo, you go to wane, right? And so another one, so you could say city, to be something. So you could say ga city, it's a duck. And then you could say ga yanastin, it's becoming a duck. So it's called a progressive imperfective, yana. And for like motion verbs, you're going to use these quite a bit. Yanashich, yanakuch, yanagut. Because motion verbs do not have an imperfective. They have to use this progressive imperfective. Okay. And this uses them twice in one sentence, which gives a sentence like this certain momentum, like he's going along crying as he's going along looking for his older brothers.
Ayatak yashak. Ayatak yashak.
Anybody not read yet?
Ayatak yashak.
Sheesh. So here you have a lot of directional stuff, right? Dak, inland, this, sha, ak. So ak is between, but sha, ak is the saddle of a mountain, like especially if you have two peaks, it's that saddle in between.
Akaha aya ausitini ka aya. Akaha aya ausitini ka aya.
Akaha aya ausatini ka aya.
Sheesh. So kaha, it is situated there. Aya ausatini ka aya. So here's this I to say like that's the person that he saw, right? So this turns this verb ausatin is they saw them or they saw it, but ausatini ka, the person that they saw. So it turns that verb into an adjective. So it's situated, so it's in the saddle of the mountain. That's where it's situated, this person that he saw.
Chukaya ausiku. Kusakakond satiye. Chukaya ausiku. Kusakakond satiye.
Trutle ayu ausiku kusacha Táax'aa.
Sheesh. So chukle. So tle is then. Chukle is just then. Chukle ayu ausiku kusakakwan chsatiyi. So he knew just then that it was the cannibal.
Schandayana, got Tessa, the owner, the Hania, and not to Tishi at the Hayot Kushrik, I should Schandayana, got Tessa, the owner, the Hania, and not to Tishi at the Hayot Kushrik, I should
This is probably the longest section of the whole story, so whoever's feeling brave, go for it. Okay.
Count to 10. Be patient. Ashkande good taste Aadé awunach dachani ye anak ute would ditech ya at yach ayo ach ut hate ayo ye ashwusine.
Sheesh. Kecha. Ashkhandigyanakut. So this ush, have we looked at this before?
I don't think we got this far.
Okay. So because you've made it this far, you get a new pronoun. Bing, 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 bing. You get a pronoun, and you get a pronoun, and you get a pronoun. Okay. So here's a new object pronoun, ush. Ush is the main character, or this person that we're talking about. So it is a third person pronoun, but it's a different one. It's called proximal, if you're interested. And so you'll see it in stories a lot. And you'll also see it in a lot of sample sentences. Like when you talk to the old people, they like to use this a lot. So when they say, okay, here's this guy, this young man is going to be ush. He is the ush in most cases, unless it's clearly stated that we're switching subjects. So when it says ashkhande yanagut, it came walking towards. So now they're both third person, but because like this boy is emerging as the main character in the story, the cannibal is walking towards him. That's how we know it. He's the ush. Reading a Raven story, Raven's the ush. Okay. Khande, going towards. yanagut. So when you want to go towards somebody, it's going to be dukhande, right? So you could say ach khande kwakut. I'm going to go see my auntie. This khande could also mean visiting, right? Now we get one of these potentials that we were talking about. So if we look at this verb, I think this one is in the database, so we'll go look in the database for this, to turn away from something, to run away from it. And it's going to be under stand and flee. And it's this one. So you would say, here's the perfective. Anak ayaw dahan. Anak ayaw dahan. They ran away from it, right? It means you turned around, and the verb is standing. That's what the verb root is. And so if you look at kesh ade anak awunach dahani, yeah, they can't run away from it. They can't get away. That's the verb form that it's using here. And so it is a complicated verb form. Kesh ade awunach dahani, yeah, anak. And so this is saying the cannibal was coming towards him. He couldn't run away. Why couldn't he run away? It tells you. Chutle, just then, wutlitik. Wutlitik means it's frozen. Wutlitiki at. Here is that other suffix we just talked about that takes a verb and makes it into an adjective. So you could say wutlitiki kate, a frozen ishan, it's a frozen dog, right? Wutlitiki at, a frozen thing. Yach ayu. But so then it has yach to say it's like that. Because what it's saying is he was stuck. And why was he stuck? It was fear that did this to him. So when you get to this point in the story, you could tell the storyteller is excited because he says it very fast. Like if we back up and listen to this whole thing, just one more time. So this whole time he's been telling us this at a very slower pace. Then he gets to this part and he says, so he gets excited and he starts speaking faster because this is an exciting part of the story, right? The cannibal shows up. He immediately knows, this is what killed my brother. This is this. It's also kind of a monstrous thing in a lot of the stories. And so as it walks near him, he's frozen. He can't do anything. Lots of stuff in here. Really cool. We get the ush again. And now we have this noun, right? So we do have, you could say, akurchet aya yechatwusene. Fear did this to me. There's other things you could say. You could talk about what did this to you, right? And so really cool stuff in this. Okay, maybe this one's longer than the last one. Maybe I lied, I don't know. Who wants to read it?
Clash Khandayan Nagudi. Awe clash awe. Kusa Hakwanch. Awe Shawahich. Udzigit. Udzigit.
Sheesh. So here again, then, as it's walking towards him. That's what this letter I is doing here, right? So this is a different suffix than the one It's very similar. The difference is this one is relational, so it's going to be opposite of the tone that's before it. When it's walking towards him. Away, there's another, whoops, that should be low tone, sorry. Let me check the other. Okay. Then, shawachich, so he's still the ush. So now we know who just got clubbed on the head, the young boy. So this is a verb for getting clubbed on the head. We've got a verb for that. If you take the sh off there, it's spanking. Away, shawachich. So here comes another sort of thing to learn. What is this CH? Why is that CH on the qasakha? Did we ever cover this one? This is a suffix that could go on to a noun to specify who's doing the thing. If it ever gets unclear who's doing it, you can throw this CH on there. And that's saying that's the one who did it. So even though the ush already tells us that, away, away. Now it's important for me to clarify. The cannibal's the one who did it. And if this CH is put onto a noun just before the verb, so the away doesn't really count as a thing that separates it. What happens is this is usually so this would be ashawachich, they clubbed them. But this CH converts this back to 0. So that's a case where you do see a third person without the on there. So it's an advanced thing. So whenever we look at these stories, we're looking at very advanced language use. But it's important for us to just sort of see these types of things that are happening. And then we get wudzigit, they fell. Audzigit, they fell there, right? So that's what the does. It's saying at that place. And a lot of times it's like a place that we've already mentioned. So if I were to say where? In between the saddle, he was up there in the mountains. That's where he was. Audzigit, he fell down there. Okay. It's probably the last one.
Wasn't the two ya gave us at the house it away at the great two day. Wasn't the two ya gave us at the house it away at the great two day.
Oh, now we get a happy cannibal. We'll end with a happy cannibal. Somebody read this.
Wasadu to Wuyak A with Kusakakwan, Adach al Sitawe Yadak, a Gwish today.
Okay. So this wasa often is like starting a question, right? Wasa idusak, wasa iati, wasa atbune. But it can also just sort of provide emphasis. Wasa dutu wuyak. How good that cannibal felt, right? So that's, you can say, wasa achtu yak. And then usually you're linking this to something else, right? So how good, so which you can also, if you were to translate that, it's not a question, right? But kusachakwan, so now the kusachakwan's feeling really good. Adach ausata wegedak tegwait today. Adach is like, so he picks them up off of the ground, probably. Ausata, this is to carry. It's not a living thing. This is it's a dead thing or a sleeping thing. So ausata would be to pick up something that's dead, or especially a sleeping baby, or it could be a sleeping person, but they're probably like passed out because they're not going to wake up because it comes down to how you have to carry them, right? It's more difficult to carry. This young man, then in the bag. Okay, the boy's in the bag, the cannibal's happy. We'll stop there. Any questions or thoughts before we go?
I've got a question.
Huh.
You mentioned that the I at the end that says that kind of when this verb happened is the relational, and the I, the tone is opposite of what came before. So when you add an I and it instead becomes an adjective, what happens with the tone?
That one's always low.
Okay.
So yeah, and they are an I, but they follow those same rules as the relational suffix, where like if it was rounded, then it would, like if you say nuke, it would be nugu, it would be a U. But yeah. And so the relational one to say like when it happened or it could sometimes be because, like ehati gudi, that one is saying like it's good that you've come here. And this is what gets a lot of learners scrambled sometimes because they're trying to figure out that or to or because. And Tlingit does a lot of that with just a single suffix, like ehati gudi, achtu yake iti. And so like in terms of how those things get structured, the first thing is think about like the relational one is like when or because, and the one that doesn't change tone turns it into an adjective. Okay. Okay, cannibal's happy, boys in the bag. See you next week.
Dun dun dun.
Goodness jeez.
Goodness, geez. All right.
Yeah.